Hey, wrestling friends and family. Today on Chat Grapple and Cheap Pops, with me, JB, and the best Chris in all of wrestling podcasts, Mr. Chris Dredd, we are talking to Jon Finkel. And that name might ring a bell to you because he is the author of the brand new book. Chris, quickly tell us about it, mate.
So basically, it is a book about this guy right here, the unpredictable life of Macho Man Randy Savage. Really looking forward to talking to him. And yeah, it's going to be a blast, man. He seems like a top bloke.
So, guys, if you are looking forward to it as much as we are, it's Macho Man Randy Savage's life, as told by Jon Finkel. Man, it's going to be a blast. All right. Hey, wrestling friends and family. Me, JB, the best Chris in all of wrestling podcasts, Mr. Chris Dredd, and our very special guest. Chris, tell us about him.
We are with the main man, Jon Finkel. He's an award-winning author of books like 1996, A Biography, Hoops Heist, The Life of Dad, Jocks in Cheek, The Athlete, Heart Over Height, and Mean Joe Green. His books have been endorsed by everyone from Mark Cuban, Tony Dungy, to Spike Lee, Kevin Durant, and Chef Robert Irvin, who is actually married to a wrestler, right? Is he still married?
Yeah, he's still married to her, yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy. So you've written for everybody. You've been on loads of podcasts and TV, but we're just extremely grateful to have you on to discuss your up-and-coming book, Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage, which comes out just before WrestleMania, 2nd of April. So, Jon, how the heck are you doing, man? Great to have you on.
I'm great. I'm happy to have you guys. Always excited to talk Macho. Thank you guys for having me on.
Good shit, man. Good shit. We're looking forward to it. And obviously, we are savaged up right now because if we're going to talk about the man, we've got to represent the man, who is a very enigmatic figure. Like, Macho Man is sort of like, I'm sure to everyone that knows him in whatever form, if you've watched him on TV or you know him personally or you are married to him or like, you know a different Macho Man. He seems like sort of in private, he was a very sort of calm, easy talk. I've seen certain interviews when, even on kids' TV in the UK in the 90s, he was very sort of philosophical, very sort of calm and collected. But the persona that we saw on screen was wild, man. So what made you sort of want to write a book about Macho Man Randy Savage?
Yeah, so I grew up at like peak macho madness. So I was, 8, 9, 10 at like WrestleMania, 3, 4, 5 and all that kind of stuff. And so, I was at that age where like I was all in. I believed every single thing happening on screen. I believed, that, Ricky Steamboat's larynx was crushed. I believed that when he fought Warrior, whoever lost was done with wrestling forever. I was all in. And so as everybody had, Hogan was the guy at that point in time, but like, we all had our own person who we kind of, stuck to. And Macho was my dude. I just loved everything about him. I did it, impersonations. We have video of me doing them as like a 7-year-old, 9-year-old with, oh yeah, my little voice and the turning around and all that kind of stuff. And it was just something that you just get into this mode of like, everything about this guy's amazing. He's so different and unique than anybody you'll ever meet or see in real life. And so when I started writing books, I always had in the back of my mind what I've called a bucket list biography of Macho. Now you can't, he's like a Mount Everest type icon for me. So you don't do that first. You do some other athletes and some other people first. And so this is my 10th book, and I wanted to make sure I was ready and able and capable of tackling it and having the confidence to do it. And now is the time to do it.
I mean, I really need to dig into 1996, A Biography, though, dude, because, that was a great year, sort of, even in the UK, the Premiership was sort of like at its peak, wasn't it? 96, Jay? It was like...
Well, no, the Premier League was at its peak in '98 when Arsenal won their first Premier League.
But come on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're doing that.
He's an Arsenal fan.
But we also had the Euro '96 summer. We had the summer of '96.
Yeah, so we had the summer of '96. Yeah. It was just incredible, man. It was like the European Championships of soccer, and it was held in England, and it was England's probably best chance for so many years to fucking win the thing,
to win something.
And
yes,
and we never won it, man. It was like heartbreak, and I remember being in tears, like, and it was, oh man, it was incredible, man. It was like such a year. I mean, you had Kurt Angle winning the gold medal. You had like so much stuff going on in '96. It was just
Yeah,
What are you?
for U.S. side and even national sports, you have so before 1996, there's no Iverson or Kobe Bryant on the national scene. So in basketball, you've got two of the biggest, maybe five icons ever coming in the league the same year. You've got Tiger Woods premiering on the PGA Tour in 1996, which was
Right.
incredible. You've got in football, Dallas Cowboys winning their third Super Bowl. But you also have in the U.S., you have the MLS started, what WNBA started, two monster leagues right now. And then on the wrestling side, obviously, before 96 in the WWF, there was no Stone Cold Steve Austin and there was no The Rock. Now they came in as, the ringmaster, and they came in as Rocky Maivia, but
Yeah.
that year was just an absolute, like, there's a line you can draw where any cultural references from 95 and before don't include all these people who now are just first name people who we talk about all the time. So that was the idea for that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig into that, man. I mean, I'm a huge MLS fan as well. I've got so many
Yeah.
Major League Soccer jerseys in my
Oh, that's great.
wardrobe, my closet. Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love a bit of MLS. Go on, Jay. You
No,
got
96, just yeah, quickly, is also the birth of the NWO as well. So like
Yes.
you've got some mad stuff there. Um, you said you did impressions of Randy Savage. I happened to see an impression of yours today. I think you were way above altitude, is that right?
Yeah, we were just on spring break here. My kids were on spring break, and we go skiing in Colorado every year. And I'd been doing my own promos for Randy throughout the launch of this book for a while. And my son, who is like the perfect age for this, so he's 11, so he was about a little older than 9 when I started writing this. So he got to rewatch every Macho Man match, like all the way from like his first time on Piper's Pit, like all the WrestleManias, everything. So he's like now like a macho fan as if he got to watch him growing up almost. And so he records all these promos, and about a couple of days before we flew out, he was like, "You should do like a promo up the top of the mountain." And then it just hit my head like, the cream of the crop of the mountain top. Yeah. So I brought my shirt up there and my glasses, and we got off the lift. There's a peak. It's like almost 11,444 feet. It's pretty high up there. And we got off the lift, and my wife and my daughter were going to ski. And I was like, "Give me like 5 minutes." So I scooted over to the side, got a nice, beautiful background of the Rockies. And yeah, I hit him with I believe to be the world record highest Macho Man promo, even including Macho Man himself. So we're just going to assume that Guinness is going to stamp this, and it's the highest Macho Man promo of all time.
No
I'm
reason why
sure.
they shouldn't. Yeah,
Yeah,
no
I'm sure
reason.
your
Yeah.
certificate's in the post, man. I'm sure.
I'll probably next time we talk, I'll have it behind me. I
That's
no
right.
doubt.
Amazing. I mean, how easy was it to get hold of people to interview about Randy? I mean, obviously we don't want too many spoilers about the book. You can buy the book 2nd of April when it comes out, ECW Press. But yeah, I mean, how did you sort of navigate who to speak to and sort of, where to cut the kayfabe from what actually fucking happened?
Yeah, well, the most important thing with Randy and to tell his story is to start at the beginning, which is really to start at Angelo, who was a pretty well-known wrestler in the 50s and 60s. Randy grew up, and his brother Lanny, who was also a wrestler, grew up in this household with a father who, when he went to work and did a good job, everybody booed and said, "You suck and you're an ass and you're the worst." And then he came home and was like, "No, that's good. You want that to happen, right?" And so I started there. He had passed away, several years ago before even Randy did, and his mother lived to in her early 90s. So she actually only passed away, I think, in 2015 or 16 or somewhere around there. So I started there and moved forward. I am a research hound. My background is magazines and newspapers. So I've done, everything I've done has always had sources and resources and interviews and all that. So I started back when their childhood. I started Downers Grove, Illinois. I interviewed as many neighbors as I could dig up through newspaper articles and Facebook and whatever other way online I could find, just internet sleuthing. I talked to pretty much his whole high school baseball team, his high school baseball coach. I talked to all the minor league players he went with. I talked to people he roomed with in the minors, and then all the way through people who he wrestled with in the ICW when he was with going against Lawler in the territory. So I talked to every possible person who I could talk to about that, all parts of his life. And that's really where you start to understand what the hell made this guy tick. Like the fact that the baseball part honestly informs everything about his wrestling career. I mean, his dream, his if you had asked Randy Poffo from age maybe 7 to 22, 23, he would not talk to you about wrestling. I mean, his dad wrestled, he appreciated it, but there was no plan B. It was baseball or bust. And he came this close. He was a AAA baseball player. So if anyone listening, like, it's as close as you can get to being on the major leagues. And he just didn't have that last bit. And his dream was just shattered. And it was only then that he was able to shut the door on that and really transform himself into a wrestler.
Baseball's loss is definitely our gain in this situation.
Yes, absolutely.
Like you mentioned, the ICW stuff and like going up against Lawler, and like it was like a rogue territory in Memphis, right?
Yeah, so the way that worked was so Randy, baseball's over. His dreams are, he literally takes his baseball bats and shatters them against the tree of his childhood home, crying like it's done. And his brother, who he's very close to throughout their lives, had already gone into wrestling like his father. And so he decided he wanted to wrestle. So they take him up to wrestle with the original Sheik and to wrestle all over the other territories. But there's one thing that I think I found one of the most fascinating things researching the book that if you guys like is you have to remember he was like a from a wrestling standpoint, like a skinny little shit, right? He was like 180 pounds, 185 pounds, 6'1". He had built his body. He was by all accounts just pretty much shredded, like abs, tight forearms, but he's a baseball physique. And so, he had to get big. His brother was already 6'1", 6'2", 225, 230. All the wrestlers, Lawler's 240, all the guys he was planning on going against, he was giving up 40, 50, 60 pounds in some cases when he turned it around. So in addition to changing his body and learning the business, that's where he started traveling a lot with his dad, all those territories. And at one point, Angelo probably looked in the mirror and thought, I have two thoroughbreds here. I have Leap and Lanny Poffo and Randy Poffo, who are both, excellent. Randy, you could already tell, even Lanny said in my interviews with him that very early on, people identified Randy as special. He just, whatever, people say in every walk of life, that thing, the audience reacted to what he did very early. And at the beginning, it wasn't even drawing heat. It was just, what is that guy doing? And so once they decided to form their own outfit, they didn't pick an easy spot. They went right against the King Jerry Lawler in his hometown, and that the outlaw name was just the way they used very guerrilla tactics to, they crashed their shows. They got thrown out by the police on purpose. Anything to make news, basically because they were kicking upward, right? Like Lawler he was the king and the king of the area. Like there was really no way they were going to go anywhere. And they did the best they could to at least draw attention to themselves.
I mean, we've seen footage. I think there's still footage on YouTube of them crashing the shows. You've got Angelo there with a massive printed banner, and you've got Macho just going crazy, like smashing the place up. I mean, the Macho madness was strong even in the beginning.
Yeah.
And there's I can't remember if it's like Channel 10 or Studio 10 interview. There's quite a big hour-long interview with Macho Man on YouTube that I was trying to dip in and out of and stuff.
Yeah, he's that era, he's really feeling himself out character-wise. So the book is divided into three parts. It's Randy Poffo, which ends, and it truly, the person of Randy Poffo really is left behind in baseball. It's like, it's such a door-closing moment. The people who I talked to who played baseball with him from high school, middle school, minor leagues, did not know or ever interact with anyone like Randy Savage or the Macho Man. He was a mild-mannered, he was a driven, focused, maniacal worker, but personality-wise, he blended in. I mean, one of the scouts for the Cardinals, the St. Louis Cardinals, was like, he was just a regular goof trying to make the team. Nobody cared what he had to say. He was just a guy. Now, you cut to, he gets into wrestling and he starts picking up he wanted to wrestle like a Savage, and him and Lanny was very integral in helping him pick his names and pick what he was doing. And also when they formed the ICW, there was not a lot of mileage to get on the same team with two brothers, right? They had all these other wrestlers they wanted to work in, but you can't have your two stars be brothers. It was weird. They wanted people not to know. So not only did it make sense from a business standpoint, but it made sense from a character standpoint to go with Randy Savage. And then there was a little bit there where he was just Randy Savage. And then the second part of the book where he really becomes full macho is when he gets into the WWF.
I mean, kayfabe's a wonderful thing, trying to make sure nobody knows whose brothers or whose family. But I
Well,
mean,
you know what's funny that I learned, and I hadn't thought of this, and you guys will appreciate this as you kind of understand how wrestling has changed over the years and breaking kayfabe and all those things. So back in those outlaw days, Lawler, they were rolling in money. They could sell out anywhere they went, but he was a good guy, and he could go sell T-shirts. He'd show up at car washes. He'd go to restaurants. He could own things. People wanted to be associated with him. Well, back then, especially in the territories, you did not break character. That you needed the people to think if you were, if you were a heel, you were a heel all the way till you went to bed, basically. And so Randy was like selling vitamins over the phone. Like they were losing. Not only were they losing to Lawler, they were losing money. And because he was a bad guy and playing this psychotic, crazy person, he couldn't exactly go up and like do a kid's birthday party, right? Like he had no other income, and so he was really stuck when that didn't really work out. He had kind of pigeonholed himself. There was no way he could turn, baby face just for no reason or in public. But he had no other way to make that kind of money that Lawler and these other guys were making. So being a heel was like a financial handcuff at the time. Which, if you know anything about the Poffos, they were very, very money savvy. They didn't spend a lot of money. They watched every penny, but he had nothing coming in for a while.
Right. I mean, from those beginnings, and then working his way through. I mean, when people talk about Macho Man Randy Savage, he sort of through the years he has sort of evolved the character all the way through, really. And I mean, I'm almost certain he was in TNA for a little bit in the end bit, just a tiny little bit. It's incredible that he's sort of, he's gone through so many decades of wrestling and been able to keep that sort of energy and that character rolling. What do you think, sort of, in his mind when he was first starting that Macho Man character? Like, where was that born out of, and that being a macho man and that sort of thing?
Yeah, he always had a bit of a tripwire temper. He learned early on that he enjoyed drawing heat more than anything else. He didn't want to play the good guy. Lanny also was better at being a good guy. He's just a nicer guy, in public and everything like that back when they were in their 20s. And when they were trying to figure out what he should do, one of the things that really stood out from him was his athleticism. He was a legitimate athlete. Not that some of these wrestlers aren't, but he was an extremely athletic, talented guy. He was probably, up until very recently with some of these newer talent in WWE, he's probably one of the best athletes we've ever had in terms of true athleticism. And so he wanted to capitalize on that. And he had the wild hair. He liked that look he was experimenting with was essentially, if you're doing like a pop psychology thing. So when he played baseball, especially in the minors, they forced you to shave, they forced you to have short hair, kind of fit in. He basically, the minute that dream was over, he went obviously the opposite route. Beard, wild, crazy hair, kind of turned his personality up to a 10, which is what they always say, the best wrestling personalities are. And so he went in and he wrestled like a madman with all the energy and all the stuff that he could. And Lanny and him talked about, what do you want to wrestle like? And they got the Savage name, came from a couple different people. Ole Anderson and some others have taken credit for it. But the Macho Man persona, the oh yeah, and all that kind of stuff, they kind of borrowed from Pampero Firpo, who in Hawaii they used to see wrestle, and he did Lenny told me they used to listen to him on the radio all the time when he'd be promoting his shows, and at the end he would always do a big like oh yeah, and so Macho kind of took his version of that. And so it was really because they had the history of wrestling in their family growing up, they kind of Macho picked and chose a couple of the things he really liked, and then obviously put 90% of his own spin on it.
The cream of the crop promo, was that all him, or did anyone have any
No,
input in
so
that?
he did like when he went out, from not that one specifically, he was so meticulous. He went into these characters, and it's really interesting. You had mentioned watching some of the earlier, interviews. Actually, the best things to watch are when he first when right after the Lawler's crew let him, they actually started doing business together. Originally they were. It's almost like they built the perfect storyline, except for they weren't on the same page. Like they were doing a work, but they hated each other, so no one actually was talking. But if they could not have planned it out better if they actually sat down to plan it out better. And once they started to do that, and Macho on purpose using like much better equipment and going in with Lawler attacking him, he's using the same verbal ticks and the same things. that he used when he got to, with Mean Gene and all those famous interviews. So Cup of Coffee in the Big Time, Tower Power. That was just his craziness. What people don't understand about Macho and what I came to appreciate is, A, he was a very cerebral person. He was an honor roll student in high school. One of my favorite like little teeny stories in the book is I talked to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and I mean, imagine this. You're watching this as our age when you're kids, and you got Macho Man twirling around doing all his stuff, elbows off the ropes, Hacksaw with his 2x4 and his tongue out, hey-oh. And if I told you then at 10 that when wrestling was over, those two gentlemen went and sat on the bus and played chess, you'd be like, what? But they did. They had running chess games. And Hacksaw said Macho was amazing at chess. He was amazing at poker. So all these great great written promos and all these things that came. He was a creative guy, but he was also a very smart guy.
And a good rapper as well. It's
Yeah. Average. Sure let's say average. Let's be nice.
All right, we'll say average. We'll say okay. Yeah, we'll say he's an okay rapper. He really enjoyed it by the sounds of things. So it was something that
when Macho did something, he did it 100%. So he wasn't too concerned. Lanny, like one of the fun things that I was so glad to talk to Lanny about was that like he kind of gave me insight into like, we all, most of us, when the rap album came out, were just like, what? And wait, Randy, what's going on? And he was like, you have to understand that when he decided to do it, in his mind, it was going to be a multi-platinum, like he was now going to be a Hall of Fame rapper. That was how he did things. Now, the choice to do it may have been, not so great. And he, at 40 something years old, maybe didn't have the chops to actually pull it off. But in his mind, he listened to rap working out. Why not become the best rapper in the world after wrestling?
It's so crazy, isn't it? It's like, it's such a Macho Man thing to do, though, isn't it? It's like,
It is. And like everything else, what's amazing is all of the important things that happened really in the Poffo's lives, not just Macho's lives, started in a gym. It was he listened to rap. A guy he worked out with started talking to him because he heard what he was listening to. Said he knew a producer, and Macho was a big connection guy. A big I'd love to meet so and so whoever guy. And the guy was, like, why don't, you ever thought of being on an album? Macho is always like, forget being on an album. How about we make an album? And it's like, great. That was it,
I always remember I'm a big King of the Hill fan. There is one episode where one of the characters gets into, massive like workout sort of thing. He's probably training these monsters from the gym come and help him train. And almost immediately one of these characters starts growling, and like, you just instantly know it's him. You know it's him. Even my missus like, that voice sounds familiar. I'm like, yeah, that's Macho Man Randy Savage, obviously.
Yeah. He did a ton of movies and TV shows, and he did cartoons, and he did Pixar movies, and he there's an alternate universe somewhere where if he doesn't pass away, he's like getting an Oscar or Emmy for voice work somehow.
Well, I mean, because that character, that energy, and that sort of that drive, it goes through the screen, whether he's wrestling, whether he's talking. I used to love him on commentary as well. When he was doing that stuff, when he wasn't wrestling and Vince sort of, I don't know the ins and outs.
He didn't like that, did he? He didn't want to do it.
No, but he still gave his energy to it though, right? He was still going 100%. Like,
right. When he did it, he loved it. He wanted to be the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to be done with the ring is what it was.
Yeah. And that energy carried through in whatever he was doing. So whether he was doing, acting in Spider-Man, or if he was doing a voiceover, or whatever, even when he was doing a fucking commercial for Slim Jims, they're so iconic that they still use clips of it today. Even in the modern commercials, they're still using clips of Randy, like snapping into a Slim Jim. Like, it's incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah. One of the things I it was always like a bit of an urban myth, and I thought you might have a better insight on it. Did he propose to wrestle Shawn Michaels like a few times, like towards the end of his WWF career?
So what happened with that was he was in the booth, doing the announcing, and he was thinking very heavily, or in his mind, he was going to go back to the ring, and he was just, remember he went to the booth largely because his life was kind of in shambles after the match made in heaven. I mean, imagine this, like, we're adults now, but like, I didn't know this as a kid, neither did you guys, but like, as this match made in heaven is happening, like literally a couple weeks before he and Liz actually separate for real.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing is happening. The pinnacle of their storyline, like the greatest love story in wrestling ever told, is happening at pay-per-view at SummerSlam at the exact same moment that like they're filing divorce papers. They can't stand each other. They're done. They're both just, capital DONE, done with each other. They don't want to be near each other. He's fallen out with Hogan, like in real life and in wrestling. Like he needed a moment and a break. And his body was, he had, are at that point 20 years of jumping off the top rope, his hips, his knees. So, that made total sense. But he didn't think, it was like, for him, it was like a hiatus, wrestling, something fun to do in the booth. He didn't think he was done. And the way Lanny tells the story is that, one night after he'd been in the booth for, I don't remember, 6, 8, 9 months, whatever it was, he gets a call, and Macho, I guess Hogan did the same thing, but they would call at all hours of the night because they were used to performing late, being up late. So, they were winding down even when they weren't wrestling anymore, 2, 3 in the morning. They were just those kind of guys. And he calls Lanny and is like, I got the finish. I know how I want to end my, WWF, time in the ring. And he pitched this really awesome, which I don't want to ruin. I'll let people read the book, but a phenomenal story arc that anyone who reads it, when you read it, you're going to be like, oh my God, like, what were you thinking, Vince? This would have been amazing. And it was about an 18-month to 2 years. It would have gone, a trilogy type thing over 2 or 3 pay-per-views with Shawn Michaels. And Vince was ready to just, he'd done moving on. He wanted the younger crop, the Bret Harts of the world and all those guys to take over. And that was it. He let him go basically, like overnight. He was on the cover of the WWE magazine, which they'd already shot and done, like, and he was already gone out of the WWE.
I mean, arguably two of the best workers to ever work in the ring, Shawn Michaels and Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, and size-wise, the Macho was just awesome. Like when you really, it's so easy to be like, yeah, throw on a crazy hat and throw on some sunglasses, but he was so meticulous. Like he understood the aesthetic of the ring. The reason why he loved him and Steamboat is because they matched up physically. They were mirror images of each other. Athletically, they were great. And so he believed Shawn Michaels athletically and size-wise, conditioning-wise, was basically Steamboat kind of 2.0, like another version of him. He wanted someone who could, there was only so much he could do against a guy like Hogan athletically. Hogan was not sprinting back and forth, and he wasn't doing some of the aerial moves.
Yeah.
Even, when he ended up fighting Warrior, at WrestleMania, like Warrior's so much bigger than him and stronger than him, and he kind of ragdolls Macho for most of that match. I didn't remember that when I started researching. I just remembered it was one of my favorite matches. But when you really watch it now, he just dwarfs Macho Man. I mean, Macho's, looks like a kid out there sometimes. And so when you look at, the aesthetics of a Shawn Michaels potential match with him, and Randy from reading the book, he is the quintessential guy that would have got his gears moving to have some kind of really legendary match.
I mean, Shawn Michaels as well. At times in the 90s, he would go faster as well to try and, not even unintentionally, he would try to trip people with his pace and his speed and stuff. There was one Savage and Shawn Michaels match in London, I think it was, or somewhere. It was in the UK, like in '92.
It was they had one. I think they had one, but it was like a taste of. I don't think Shawn Michaels was any draw yet, right?
I think it was just after WrestleMania 8, and Savage was it was like the European tour just after WrestleMania 8, which that WrestleMania, that 91, 92 run of Savage is one of my favorite things like in wrestling ever. Like him and Flair had this ridiculous back and forth. It was, and
Ric Flair say he had naked pictures of Miss Elizabeth. I mean, it was like they really turned it up. And the funny thing is, they were, I mean, societally, like they were kind of older. Like it's as a kid, and when I'm, when I'm watching it at that point, I'm already, almost, I'm in high school and all these things. So they don't seem that, everybody seemed older. So I didn't really put it together. But when you watch it again, it's another one of those where with the benefit of time and hindsight and growing up myself, I'm like, these guys were in their 40s basically, like running around, like Ric Flair especially. I mean, by that point, he still had all the charisma and all the stuff, but athletically, Flair was well past. And he was. It's really remarkable, that match, especially they did some real bumps there, and a couple moments where you realize like these guys are not in their Peak anymore. But they put on, an amazing show, and the lead up was awesome for that.
I can still hear when you talk about it now. All I can hear is Bobby Heenan going, "Put up the picture, show us the picture." Like it's literally like emblazoned into my mind that whole sort of thing, and that WrestleMania was like, "Show us the picture." It's incredible. Like,
but remember back then we had no Twitter, we had no online, we had nothing. So when that rumor broke, like it was like, you're like, wait a minute. This is crazy. Is it real? Like,
could be
sounds
true.
real.
Yeah.
It could be true. It could
Absolutely.
really be true. Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to shatter some minds here. I believed it, but I was 5 when that first came out. So yeah, I was like, what the hell's going on?
Like 14 or 15 or so. So
yeah, I mean,
but
I was
it was
old
more
enough
to
want to see the picture. Let's just put it that way.
yeah. Everybody would. Well, there's I always I have so many matches that I cover, but there's a moment where Miss Elizabeth is trying to like distract Ted DiBiase and Andre Giant, and she has the bathing suits, under the thing on, and they pull her dress off. And I remember being like, I don't know, maybe 10 at that point or 11, and it was like, is this real? Is this a real thing that just happened? And like when you watch it now, she said, I guess had said in some interviews that she wasn't, she was kind of coaxed, and she wasn't to today's standard. She really wasn't, especially with like the Attitude Era where they would come out at almost nothing, topless
with just
half
like
the time.
tape on,
She really wasn't doing
duct
anything.
tape on,
yeah, basically. But for that era, it was pretty risque, and I think she had regretted it. But it was one of those teenage boy moments where like your brain is just like buzzing, like, oh my god, this is the most I've ever seen of Miss Elizabeth ever.
So going forward, if them breaking up, I heard that it was actually Savage that got Miss Elizabeth work in WCW at that time. Is that right?
Yeah, Randy was always one to look out for people who he loved, and I mean he brought Lanny there, even though Lanny never really actually worked. Lanny was like part of the Slim Jim. He was like a throw-in rider, for the Slim Jim deal. Can you find some work for my brother was his famous thing, and it was the same thing when he brought Elizabeth into the WWE when they met. The plan was to have there was a couple other names floated about to be his manager, and he basically was like, my wife's good looking, and I think she'd be good at this, and she was good looking, so they tried it, and it worked. And when you write books like this, you end up finding these little like sliding doors moment in time, and I always think with Elizabeth that there's some, people always talk about we're in a weird timeline or whatever. There is some timeline where she is like a famous actress or like famous TV sportscaster because she was just naturally magnetic, had the beauty, but she was very talented. And so, at the end of when they got the WCW and WWE's over, Macho was a businessman first, like everything. Same with the reason that Hulk greenlit Macho coming over. Like, there's money to be made with having the Macho Man and the Hulk back together and wrestling against or for each other. And the same thing with Miss Elizabeth. And by all accounts, seemed to be a nice reunion for everybody. I think that stage was gone. I mean, there was some crazy stuff with her and Lex Luger and other things, but it's very hard now with everybody, like you mentioned very early with wrestling, like what to say with some of these guys. They have, some of them have an axe to grind. Some of them are trying to rewrite history to make themselves look better or worse. So that stuff, I tried to stay as far away from rumor. I really dealt with what we know, and then maybe, shared a couple of different versions of what happened throughout the book, of not so much those things, but other things. But yeah, that was by all accounts like a nice get together, but I think there were some very stressful moments with the kind of being thrown in his face that she was with some of the other wrestlers. And I don't think, they got, part of it was when they got separated and divorced and all that, she was just done with the wrestling life and was trying to find normal people. But at that point, I think she had some issues, and it was, it's hard to go into. It's terrible. They're both, she passed away and he passed away, and we can't ask the sources. So.
I mean, even that whole angle when Flair was coming out with Elizabeth and like saying, yeah, she's spending your money and all this, like, I'm sure there was sort of like, the best angles have got that sort of sliver of truth to them. And that was all sort of, that whole fucking time, you had, even when Elizabeth was seen to sort of turn, and she was there with Nancy Sullivan at the time, and that sort of that whole sort of era, early WCW, when they went over, like it did seem to be sort of like a bit of a raw sort of time. There was realness to the storylines and that, you know. So
yeah, it's almost like you wish it could have just ended even in the ring after Match Made in Heaven. Like, you know, it just would have been perfect there. And I know there's money to be made in the storylines and all that. But you know, as you're writing, you know, something like this, and you kind of look at all the things that might have happened, and there's no way to know it. And she needed money, and he was working, and you know, for a little while the reunion was cool. But yeah, it's just one of those feelings where there was a perfect ending there, and then they just kind of went past it, you know.
Was it a lot easier to get like sources from WCW and that, like, because it's still, I mean, it's not recent now. It feels recent, but it's not
Well,
like
it was an interesting part. So I've done, like I said, a lot of books, and this is the first one that I've done where the person passed away publicly, like in the era of social media and podcasts and things. So one of the first after, you know, like I said, I try to research somewhat chronologically just so I can kind of tease out all the things that are going to be you know, want to talk about in the future. And, you know, you always ask, you know, who else should I talk to? And that leads to another person, another person. And then as you get forward, so many of these guys honestly have talked like ad nauseum about Macho and have done all the documentaries, all the podcasts. You know, it's like, what else are you going to ask Hogan? What else are you going to ask Jake the Snake? Or what else are you going to ask even Bret Hart? These guys have they've all done hours long podcasts talking about him, kind of eulogizing him, especially right when he passed away. So my focus was on, you know, because those are sources, right? They're interviews. So I have those. So my focus really went on the people surrounding Macho at that time who were, you know, maybe not the biggest name people, but who almost always have like the best stories. For instance, like Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff's son used to travel with the wrestlers when he was 8. So huge wrestling fan. His dad's Mr. Wonderful, and he's on the Greyhound bus going from city to city, you know, sitting with Macho Man, right? And he really had a great understanding of Macho Man, who he was. You know, Macho was incredible with kids. I found a ton of people who had met him through that. People who were at like, you know, book sign. I'm not like the you mentioned the CD. Like I've found people who are at like his original album signings, right? At Target. You know, those are the people who get the impressions that aren't through the lens of being approved by WWE, being approved by whoever it is. These are
yeah,
people who experienced Macho Man from a different level. You mentioned Spider-Man, like, you know, I interviewed the Bonettes, like people, you know, the extras on the set, like that. Those are the people who I thought would flesh out his story because, you know, no, who's going to buy a book that just repeats, you know, the 17th time Hogan has told X story about, which is great. I'm glad he did all that, but it's all out there. And when it made sense, of course, I can use those as sources. But to your point of the most, you know, the interviews that made the most sense, like even in that WCW era, his lifestyle around that time was interesting. You know, he was doing these charity events for George Steinbrenner at Yankee Stadium, I mean, of the Yankees for at the Tampa Children's Hospital. And I found the guy who set those up with the Yankees and what was Macho like talking to these kids. And I talked to some of the people who attended these events. So to me, those were the more interesting people to talk to. And because I had those other transcripts kind of banked from the on the record podcast and things, it really fleshed out, I thought, who he was and where his final act was going. You know, obviously nobody knew he was going to pass away, but where we were headed in the final 4 or 5 years of his life.
I mean, yeah, absolutely right with the kids and that because he did UK like kids TV, like
Mm-hmm.
he
yeah.
would when he would come over and like he was philosophical with these kids, but it was
It
all
really
about
was.
like staying in school and everything like that. It was always
Yeah.
this really positive message. I mean, he did flirt with the presenter though, didn't he? That was quite funny. But
No, I
that
mean,
that sounds about right.
yeah,
but he was talking. Yeah, he was talking about stuff like, and this is in, you know, the mid 90s, the early to mid 90s, and he's talking about how it's okay for like boys to cry and stuff.
Mhm.
Like, you know, I don't know if you've seen the clip from Live and Kicking.
I
Um,
haven't seen that one, no.
oh, dude, we'll say
so
no.
it's
It's
in the link.
incredible. Is it? So it was basically him on the show on UK TV, and like kids would ring up and be like in the audience. So it was like a Saturday morning live broadcast TV show,
Uh-huh.
and he had kids that were calling up and like asking Macho Man questions, and they was asking, "Oh, is wrestling real? Is it fake?" and all this,
They're
and
asking
you
me
know,
about the snake bite and stuff. Yeah.
asking about the
Oh,
snake
okay.
bite and stuff like that, and about bullying and things like that. And it was just really, I mean, I remember at the time it was like when we see Macho Man on the screen, because we were watching Superstars on a Saturday morning or whatever, you know, and seeing we watch WWF, but then we seen this different side of him, and that was a beginning for me to sort of say, hold on a minute, these guys are sort of people, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it was really, really interesting. It's a lot live. It's Macho Man Randy Savage on Live and Kicking. So
Live
if you
and Kicking,
can't
okay.
find it, we'll send you the clip. It's incredible.
Yeah, he was like that in a lot of ways with kids. You know, he would almost do anything for them. There's all these goofy stories, even like high school kids. There's a great story I found towards the end of when he was long retired. And he again in the gym was working out, and somebody was talking to him about a local high school had just a shitty gym. They didn't have, you know, he was talking about how this kid worked out at this gym, you know, and he said he played football, and Macho was like, well, why do you have to work out here? Doesn't your school have a good gym? And he's like, nah, it's a shitty gym. So what does Macho do? He buys them a new gym, equips the whole thing, names it after his father, Angelo Poffo's like powerhouse gym inside the high school, gives a pep talk to the high school football team before the season starts. Of course, they go undefeated. You know, it's like there's just all these stories that bubble up with someone like Macho Man that have nothing to do with the storyline or his run at the WCW. Or these are the stories that I found that I thought were the ones that really informed who he was as a person, which I thought was the most fascinating stuff.
The rap album isn't the first CD he's on though, is it, Chris? Do you have the Slam Jam like LP?
Yeah, dude, I've actually got. Let's have a look
He's
in my little
he
box
showed
of.
me this the other day when I was there with him, and it's unbelievable.
You have that?
Yeah, dude, I have the vinyl, and it's got the poster as well.
Yeah, I remember the tape.
Yeah. So it's just the little sort of, you know, the little vinyl, the WWF Superstars, Slam
What's
Jam,
the song? I mean, I remember it's like the Ooh Yeah, or I've seen the video of it. Yeah.
Slam Jam.
Yeah.
It's a banger. It's a classic. It's again one of my sort of things that vividly I had that poster on the back of my door when I
Yeah.
was growing up, and
Sure.
it's all these things that sort of, as you get older, you know, people do sort of, you know, cling to the nostalgia of sort of, you know, when you're growing up and what sort of things you're into, and it sort of makes you sort of, you're reliving those in vicariously living your youth again. But
Mhm.
when you grow up and you hear the real stories about these people that you, when you were growing up, you thought they were one thing, and then as you get older, you hear more stories, and you read books like the book that you written. You know, we've had Brian R. Solomon on here a couple of times as well, another great author who's done some fantastic work. You know, and you're reading about these guys, and you know, it's incredible. Just, you know, because when you're a kid, you don't understand really. You know, it's sort of a soap opera that you're watching. It's almost like a cartoon. These guys are like cartoon characters. But
Yeah.
when you get older and you realize that these people, like the stories you're telling about Randy, that, you know, he's just a fucking really nice guy, super down to earth, would do anything for anyone if he felt that it needed to be done. And
Yeah.
it's just, you know, it's a shame because I think he really did go through it. You know, I think we don't really hear a lot about how he dealt with Elizabeth passing away, and how he was sort of in the situation in which she passed away as well, because she was only 40 odd years old. She was only like 42
Yeah.
years old or something.
Yeah.
Do you talk much about in the book about how he dealt with, you know, or anyone around him spoke about how he dealt with her passing?
Yeah, he says there's a really good interview. Surprisingly, towards around the time of the rap album, he also was doing. There was a video game that came out. I don't know, WWE Legends or something, early in the 2000s. And a couple of the best interviews I found with him on the record are these interviews he did promoting this video game, where he was pretty much. I got a good feel from writing the book when he was in character, even though he was always in character, but when he was answering as himself versus kind of put on a promo. And he has a comment in there about how, you know, she's one of the loves of his life and always will be. And it was you know, something like what anybody would say, a piece of it. He found out it felt like a piece of his heart, even though they hadn't spoken in a few years, was gone. And it was very much a different part of his life at that point. and then later on he remarried an old sweetheart. Not remarried, but married a woman that he had known very briefly in minor league baseball, and they hadn't seen each other in 30 years. Again, through a gym connection. A woman was like, "Hey, do you know Lynn?" And he was like, kind of the name rang a bell, and he was like, they went on a date in 1970, whatever, and they met back up after, and she had gotten married and had kids and had her whole life. Basically, they both had their own lives, and then reconnected in their 50s, and that seemingly made him really, really happy and at peace. So that's I use his own words there. Lanny said pretty much the same thing. He was devastated about how it happened. And I think it was one of those things where when you spend that much time with somebody, married or not, but especially they were married, and how important she was to his life, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
He said it hurt. And I think they were I don't know, they hadn't talked in a while. He even says it because they asked him, like, when was the last time you saw her? And he said it'd been years. But I think that connection, there was no burned bridges. I think at that point, I think there was just, they just went their separate ways.
Well, do you know if he was pissed at Lugo at all?
Who's that? You know what? I don't want to put words in his mouth on that. I heard he was, Lanny told me that he was uncomfortable with some of that way that went. I don't know. I didn't talk to Lex. He's gone on the record a million times about what he feels. So I didn't think there was anything else he was going to tell me that he didn't tell in 4 documentaries and 7 podcasts.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So, and he's also, it's, as a journalist, like, that would be the most ass covering mode you'd ever want to be in, right?
Absolutely.
If you were in that situation, and he may be telling 100% the truth. I have no idea. But from what they, what I had researched and heard, it's just one of those things that the relationship was uncomfortable for him, and possibly people were concerned for her as well, just because of the lifestyle. And that, the lifestyle, you could just throw that lifestyle umbrella over basically all the wrestlers at some point in their career. So it's hard to point fingers. They all, Luger was at the top of the top, Jack, Handsome, they all went after it at that time, and when they were finally at the peak. So it's hard to fault anyone that they were single-handedly responsible for someone else's, what happened to someone else.
Just quickly, I know you probably cover this in the book as well. Couple of things. So about that lifestyle, there's a lot of I know mockingly people that don't watch wrestling will sort of make memes out of Macho Man promos and just say, cocaine is a hell of a drug, and then you've got a Macho Man promo or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, has he ever sort of come out publicly and said he was sort of doing any sorts of drugs or anything like that? Because it was a wild time, man. I mean, was he sort of?
Yeah.
Was he living that rock star lifestyle, or was he?
No, Macho was pretty much dedicated to, like, his body. He definitely tried steroids, like we talked about earlier.
Sure.
You're not going to go from 185 to 240 in a year and a half without a little bit of help. Lanny makes a very big point of saying that they were legal at the time. He was not doing them when they weren't. He was not, at the time, they weren't good for you, but he wasn't breaking laws. And even he famously came out on Arsenio Hall and admitted that he had done them, and they gave him mood swings, and they gave him, tantrums, and kind of, he didn't feel like himself when he was on them. He famously joked that they gave him PMS. And so, he was open with that. And then, who knows, that was, in the 90s, he got pretty big for Spider-Man.
He was jacked. He was
beyond jacked. I talked to Paul Roma, if you remember him from the WWF.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Roma was like, I went to, he was pretty close with Macho, because Macho, he either hung out with, like, the hacksaw guys, some of the smart guys, but he was really into the guys who took lifting seriously. So when they would land in a city, or they'd arrive in a city, Roma was what came from a bodybuilder football background. And he would basically be like, where are we lifting? And Roma was pretty organized. I guess he kind of always knew the gyms in certain towns. And so Roma, who knew him pretty intimately from those days, mentioned that when he was, cut to 20 years later, he's taking his kids to see Spider-Man. He said it was like 2 minutes into the scene before he was like, holy shit, that's Randy. Like, he didn't even recognize him. And he said, I was like, what do you think he was on? I don't know. And he's like, whatever it was, some concoction, because he looked like, I mean, he looked like he was about to pop. I mean, he was really, really big,
Yeah.
and Lanny was very coy. He's like, he did what he had to do to get back, and he was already almost, you know, it was 50, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
hard to get that big that fast because he only had, I think, 4 or 6 months to prepare for the role. He
Right.
was not out of shape, but not in looking like a peak wrestler shape. And so, yeah, that's one of those where it's like, I don't know what he did or didn't do on the hard drug side, but like again, I try to stick with what we know.
Sure.
I know, like, you know, Rip Rogers talked about in the early ICW days, just, you know, just partying, drinking all the time, going out all the time, which is what you would do if you were a 25-year-old with no family, no ties anywhere, traveling 6 out of 7 days a week all over the country, you know. So that's kind of where it was, but I don't know, and I didn't hear anything from those days about like any hard drugs or anything like that. Now, someone listening who may have known him back in the 70s will be like, "You idiot, how did you not know this and this?" But I talked to a lot of people, and no one was going on the record and saying anything. So
No.
All right, sorry to break this up for a second. We know that you're enjoying this chat with John, but we need to break for a quick second whilst we have a little word from our show sponsor. Back in a sec, guys. Hey, guys, we are stepping away from our interview with Jon Finkel just for a second to talk about Wraith Energy. Guys, you can get 10% off your order by using our code GRAPPLE. Look at that, he's taking a sip of it as well. What flavor you got?
Mojito.
Oh, mojito. I went with sour apple.
Oh,
And oh, goodness me, we are going crazy. We know that there's other energy drinks out there on the market, the ones that claim to give you wings, the ones that, you know, call
turn
you,
you into a beast.
yeah, call you a beast or something like that. They're not the ones for you. They are loaded with sugar and, you know, just generally bad for you.
Yeah.
So get yourself some Wraith Energy, just like your boys here. You know, live a cleaner life.
That's right. Link in the description. Use the promo code GRAPPLE. You can go on there when you put an order on. You can have the choice of adding on. So when you buy a pot, you spend X amount of money. You can choose a load of samples. So like JB saying, you've got the sour apple. We've got the life's a beach. You got the blueberry lemonade. We've got fiery ginger beer. We've got the Coca Cola.
You've
The
got Gamer
mojito.
Bath Water.
Yeah. So we've got it all, and you know, all the flavors are fantastic. So when you buy yourself a flavor that you like, you know, you can sample a load of other flavors. So then there's going to be other flavors that you like. Link in the description. Use the promo code GRAPPLE. You get yourself 10% off. The delivery is very, very quick, very, very efficient. The product is fantastic. We're not just saying that. It is the top of the top on the market at the moment. It's got your minerals, your amino acids and that for your brain. It's also got your caffeine, but it's just not as horrible, filled with horrible shit like all that other lot is. It's Wraith Energy, available. Go use the link in the description and use the promo code GRAPPLE, and you can get yourself a fantastic deal. Loads of free stuff. They're always giving away free shit. So get on there, help out the show, help out yourself. We know everyone's bang on the energy drink, so go and do it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And as Chris said, when you're placing an order, just smash the code GRAPPLE in the offer, in the codes bit. If not, we have a link in our description that will take you straight to it. What more can we say? Wraith Energy. Thank you, guys. Back to the interview with John. In the book, does it touch too heavily on the injuries of Randy? Because, like, I know the latter years in like WCW, he, you know, obviously he's getting older and things are hurting way more. That ridiculous bump from the top of the cage at Halloween Havoc,
yeah, he blew his knee out,
96 or 97, where he jumps from the top of the cage, lands, essentially, it looks like his knees explode. How does he deal with that?
So the issue, the funny enough, so I kind of mentioned like cumulatively all the issues he was having, the years and years of, really it was that knee injury was specifically like kind of gruesome, horrible injury,
Yeah.
but it was not as bad as the cumulative. You know, the elbow drop that he would do was actually the hip and his leg took the brunt. If you watch,
Right.
you know, even the latter ones, and you know, a lot of the guys who were, you know, they're like, he missed it towards the end of his career. He was missing those and just landing on people. Early in his career, he was able to time the elbow actually in the hip over the person. You know, so they weren't really taking the brunt of the jump, and he wasn't really feeling it with the bounce of the mat and hitting it spread out over both of those. But as he got a little older and he couldn't jump as high and couldn't work his body as well, his hip was just constantly taking the rank. So he couldn't walk great towards the end, especially that very end of the WCW run when he was trying, and even when he kind of tried to come back as Team Madness. I mean, he really couldn't. I have a joke in the book where it's like, forget jumping off the top rope. Like, he needed the rope to get up, to stand up straight, at that point. And then amazingly, the worst injury that affected him the absolute most for what would be the rest of his life happened during the Spider-Man shoot. He did in the fight scene, he did a monkey roll, which is he's coming upside down off the ropes and bouncing back in. And if you watch it, I'm sure you'll be curious. He lands on his head as a 48-year-old guy, or it was, and essentially, like, it looks like he snaps his neck. I never noticed it because in the scene, but when they actually used the take where it happened, and they were afraid that he didn't move for like 15, 20 minutes. Like, they thought he was paralyzed. He managed to get up, did some finishing takes, but Lanny said that he couldn't turn to the right for the rest of his life. Like, he was in serious pain for weeks after that.
Man, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I mean, we will have to watch that.
You're gonna freeze frame it, and you're gonna go, oh, his head is just smashed, and then you're like, he's not like some 26-year-old who looks like he'll bounce back. Like, it just looks like it just snaps. It's terrible.
Oh, brutal.
So the worst injury wasn't getting bitten by a snake then?
No. The snake was bad. More from like a scare tactic standpoint. That's a cool story. I mean, I know they've done a lot of things on it in some of the docs, but that was one of the best things about talking to Lanny was Lanny was in the car with Elizabeth and Macho the day before when she was, forget all the other stuff. She was like a concerned wife saying, like, you're not going to get bitten by a snake, period. Like, forget TV. Like, we're not doing this. And then Lanny jokes that he was like, I was the little brother, like, pretending to be asleep in the back seat, just listening to them argue whether he was going to get bit by a snake on live television or not. And that's where they came up with the idea of letting Jake take the bite first. And if he was alive, or, I mean, really, if you really think about how goofy this whole scenario was, like, crazy. Like, they decide, he's like, so this is the solution they came up with. If he gets bitten, if he's willing to take a snake bite and he's fine, then he'll let him get bit, as if you can't produce more venom or have a different reaction than somebody else. Like, it's not a scientific way to do something like this.
No.
But that was what they went with, and there's all kinds of rumors. I think Lanny and Randy have told the story that I guess the snake got sick and died, and so maybe the snake couldn't handle Randy's venom. But I don't know. I've never been able to confirm that. There was a few snakes that Jake had to carry through at the airport. He's even told a couple different versions of that story to Joe Rogan, and then another thing. So, like everything else in wrestling, the story, once it's out in the world and has been told a million times, the best version or the coolest version or whatever is the one that gets told. But I do know for a fact that day before is when Elizabeth, the wife, was telling Randy, the husband, here's how we're going to handle this snake thing,
Randy mentions the snake dying on that Live and Kicking show, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he says it. He railed with that for a long time. I don't know if it's true or not.
Just to go a little bit, delve into the sort of, and I know you have to deal with facts. Do you know where the rumor ever came up with? Because you must. I mean, you're a wrestling fan, right? You obviously you must have heard the rumor that everyone said that Randy slept with Vince McMahon's daughter, right?
Yeah.
Where the fuck did that come from? Do you know? Have you?
I don't know. It's Lanny wouldn't talk about it because he was like, it's nonsense.
Of course, yeah.
If it wasn't nonsense, he'd still say it's nonsense, especially now.
Yeah.
It's one of those that Stephanie was the perfect age for it to take on a life of its own. I can't remember at the time. She would have been in her early 20s, I believe.
Right.
He was in his 40s, and he was the Macho Man. I mean, what better rumor to start than a guy named the Macho Man sleeping with the guy who kicked him off the, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it all is there, and it all is one of those. It's like a couple of other stories about him where it almost isn't so much whether it's true or not true. It's that there's like a tiny percent of you that's like, maybe it happened. That's why it had. I think that's why all these things about him, these random stories have legs, because he was so original and so out there. and he was so willing to do what he could to give the audience, which was always his number one goal, like the best experience possible, whether it meant a storyline that had to carry outside of the ring, into the ring, and all that. You just don't know. I mean, no one's that just feels like it would have had to come out by now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those that's the only reason I would say, again, I have no idea whatsoever, but the only reason I would just kind of be like, if I had to give it like a 60-40 yes or no, I'd go on the leaning on the no side. Is just because that seems like after 30 plus years that one of her friends would have made bones or made some headlines or gone on social media and said it's time to confirm why Randy, whatever. But again, like he's been gone for, almost 13, 14 years. So who knows?
Feels like Randy has the most sort of stories and rumors like out about him. Like it feels like, in my mind anyway, almost every wrestler, has some sort of folklore or something. And I'm just like, in my mind, I'm thinking of loads of them even right now. But like one of them was Randy threatening to quit and go back to the WWF in like '98. Like was that ever a thing? Did that ever?
That one,
I
I'd
think it
heard
was more
that.
holding up for more money, like in WCW.
Yeah, the issue with some of these things with wrestling is that I have no idea, maybe Bischoff or one of those guys, and I've listened to all their podcasts about him too. There's a lot of things that happen in a negotiation that aren't actually what's going to happen if it's just about a contract. There's a lot of times in his career where he wanted to kind of push to see what his leverage actually was, or maybe he just wanted money for his brother, which he often did in terms of, not just handing him money, but a spot for him on the roster or whatever it was. So yeah, I don't know. In that case, I remember those rumors, and in the research for it, it seemed to be part of just negotiating of what he was trying to do. There's nothing on the WF side that says that was ever going to happen, though. I mean, that was like, if you think about it, now you're talking 2 years into The Rock. You've got Stone Cold establishing himself. You've got some, Undertaker's doing his thing. You've got Shawn Michaels. I mean, it would be weird. I don't know where he would fit. Almost like it made sense for him to never leave. But at 98, it almost made sense for him, not to come back. I don't know where obviously, if he was coming back full Macho Man with the neon and all that. But at that time, he was an old man. I mean, he dressed in the black and did the shouting and all that. But like, it would have, that was my, like, I call it in the book, the chapter, like dark macho, where like it wasn't, he was still Macho Man, but the joy seemed to have left his body. The early Macho, the neon and the colors and the spinning and the promos were fun. I mean, he was having fun. Even when he was, hot dogging and grandstand, even doing all that, you could see it was fun. And then it just became like pissed off old man ponytail, guy. And, he couldn't move. That was the other part. It was like, you can't be very threatening when all you have to do is a light jog away from somebody and they can't catch you.
That's such a shame, man. But it's a common story, sort of, in the wrestling business, isn't it? You've got these guys that sort of, and it's such a shame that Randy as well was at that point where he was sort of not so much, I think, bitter at the business, but more sort of,
jaded, possibly.
Yeah, just jaded, and sort of his body was just absolutely fucked, falling to pieces. Arguably, he was one of the greatest to ever do it. He's on so many people's Mount Rushmore. The stories of how meticulous he was putting the matches together, and even Steamboat has come out, as I'm sure saying that they were in a hotel room and he's going through this, how many points of the match that they're going to do, and it's still today held up there as one of the greatest match. They stole the show of that WrestleMania. So he did love the business. It wasn't, and he did everything sort of 110%. Well, Macho probably 150%.
Yeah.
He wasn't a normal man, was he? Like it's
no. No, he was unique, and I think one of the things that, as I'm writing the whole thing and you kind of understand his full life arc, it wasn't. I don't believe he. I'm just putting myself into what like I said again, pop psychology of kind of studying the Macho Man and Randy Savage. I don't think he got that his legacy was secure Yeah, like he didn't know somehow in the mid 90s, even the WCW run. I don't think he quite understood that he had done what he wanted to do. He was immortal as a wrestler.
Right.
And they all want to hang on as long as they can. He tried, he surrounded himself with gimmickry, and as Landy said, and Team Madness and the women and this and that. And then he tried the rap album. He tried all these things. And look, he could do whatever he wants. He was not stupid with his money. He had plenty of money. It wasn't about that at all. But I think there was a part of him that maybe didn't get a chance to take a break and step out and realize how unbelievably like adored he was, and that we didn't need him to be this screaming big tough guy at 50. We almost were ready to just have him go back to where he was happiest at his peak, mid 90s, cream of the crop. And he did that, with that final video that's like, famous for everybody when he was, talking about the video game. That's the most Randy Savage I thought he was from like 93, right? Like it was like that
Yeah.
was he came back, he had the white hair and the white beard, but he did the stuff and it was like it was almost like you breathed. I remember when it came out, it was like a sigh of relief. It was like, oh, that guy's still in there.
Yeah.
And I think we were robbed of the big homecoming, the big second comeback of him coming back confident and comfortable in his own skin as the peak Macho Man, not the kind of darker attitude era versions that he tried to use to hang on.
I mean, even going back, like, and watching some macho stuff from that early 90s in particular, like the pops he was getting, like even as a commentator and he did I think he did WrestleMania 10, didn't he? He did the match with Crush, the Falls Count Anywhere thing, like, but even then, him not knowing that he was one of the most respected, one of the most sort of sought after guys, like he was just getting pop after pop, and just it's amazing how he didn't see it.
Yeah, I'm saying he didn't, only because of the moves he made are of someone who didn't quite understand that he had secured that he was that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And to many people, he was Hogan, especially as time goes by. We're not talking about draw and all the things that nowadays with the dirt sheets and the ratings and all the, just he's in an iconic level for most of us. He's equal to Hogan. Like you're not telling the history of wrestling of that era without talking of those two in the exact same sentence. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I don't know, maybe, I broached it a little with Lanny, and he even said he's like, he was always, he wanted to try everything he tried to get back into, the spotlight eventually. But then he got calm and peace had, he let the WWE shoot that commercial in his house, right? Like, coming to the house to do that video. And, I would have loved to see where that reconciliation would have gone. And, who would have been, the pop that he would have gotten coming out like a surprise at maybe one of the 30th or 35th anniversaries of a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania, with Hogan or with Steamboat. I mean, these are moments that obviously would have been for him,
Yeah.
but they would have been amazing for us, especially if we didn't know. I mean, now everything's leaked and it kind of sucks, but like if you really had a moment where it was one of those like, stadium goes black and then boom, Steamboat and Savage are in the ring again. I mean, the place would just, wherever it is, it would explode. And so we didn't get to see that.
I always imagine his Hall of Fame outfit would have been something
Yes.
out of this world. Yeah.
Oh, and his speech, I mean, being robbed of his Hall of Fame speech,
Yeah.
I imagine Lanny would have helped him with that for sure. But yeah, there's all these moments, and it's all selfish. I mean, it's we lost him, but his ex-wife is still, or the wife he passed away. The wife who's still alive, who succeeded him, is still here. She probably misses him. I mean, he has Lanny had, I think, a daughter he was an uncle to, and so he touched a million people's lives. And I just biography for him, but there were people who were friends with him for a long time that are still around. I'm sure Hacksaw misses him to this day. So it sucks. I think we had a special time with him from wrestling fan standpoint, and it's easy to name like 5 things that would have been amazing had he not passed away.
Yeah.
It's incredible how he influenced another generation of wrestlers as well, because you've got sort of Jay Lethal, who when he came through and he was doing sort of the black machismo sort of gimmick and that, any thoughts of what he thought about that? Sort of more in depth ideas on that, because I'm sure he sort of green lit it to a point, right? He sort of
Yeah, I don't know what his involvement with that was at all. You know, we watch now. I think I mentioned my son earlier is 11 and watched all this stuff, and like I watch it now, and even like Cody Rhodes' whole outfit and his whole thing. Like obviously Seth Rollins is the natural, but I think Macho would have had fun ripping on Seth Rollins. His stuff's a little like
Yeah.
artsy, goofy, whereas Macho is all. I really think they actually would have been not that they're they were contemporaries. They might have been fun rivals. But when you watch some of these guys, it's like. I always tell my son when he first started getting into it in this crop, I'm like, if you could take like the entrance and like the glitz of like a pay-per-view Cody Rhodes entrance with like some of the swagger of like an LA Knight, that's the best you can kind of throw together of like obviously two different everythings.
yeah.
But the walk and the talk and the pop of LA with the Macho didn't wear suits or whatever, but Cody's outfits a lot of times are glitzy and glittery with the robes and the whole thing.
He's got the
yeah, he's got all that
yeah.
stuff for, especially I'm sure for WrestleMania it's going to be crazy. For those big pay-per-views, he has those. And I think that's the best way I could like his legacy is not the reason he's so big is because his legacy isn't like, oh, this guy's the next version of Randy. It's like these three A-list guys all took a piece of Randy. And to me, that's the most impressive.
Absolutely.
Where else do we go? We have to keep talking about this book. It is out literally.
Comes out April 2nd, yeah.
April 2nd. Amazon?
Everywhere, yeah. Wherever people are buying it.
Wherever you can get your books.
If you can buy it directly from Jon, do buy it directly or more directly than Amazon, because you make less money from Amazon, and we're aware. So we want to chuck as much dough at Jon as you can, because he's put in the work, he's interviewed the people, he's done his diligent research on this book. Also, I want to talk to you about you being the Gym Rat's Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about Books and Biceps, bro.
Yeah, Books and Biceps is a newsletter I started maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Just sharing. I read a ton of books anyway, and it started as a way to kind of get readers behind the scenes of when I research for books too. So I share a book every week, and it could be a wrestling book, could be a great novel, could be really anything that I'm basically whatever I'm reading. There is no criteria other than I actually read it, and here's why I think you would like it. And over time, it's like I'm a meathead. I lift a ton, so I share a workout too, or cool workout motivation stuff that I find. It could be a new rap song that I like. It could be, I put on like when Sheamus has his, Celtic Warrior workout's a cool thing in there, or whatever, something meatheady. And then I write columns throughout the week on just whatever's up, in my head. And so yeah, you basically get like workout motivation, gym motivation, and it got picked up. The New Yorker profiled me right before the end of last year in December, and made it like, the elite esteemed New Yorker, wanted to watch me work out and talk to me about the books that I read. And it was great. I had a group of guys who read the newsletter come over. I have a garage gym here, and they worked out together, and the guy interviewed all of us, and it was a cool story. So yeah, if you're listening, sign up. If you like wrestling and you like reading, which is not the hugest overlap, there are some wrestling fans who don't ever read anything. But if you like wrestling, you like reading, you'll enjoy Books and Biceps.
Incredible. So get on that, jonfinkel.com, right?
jonfinkel.com, and then on Twitter at Jon_Finkel, and on Instagram at Jon_Finkel.
Yeah, and you'll see all those links in the description of the video and of the podcast description as well. You can't miss them.
Thing is, though, we can't let Jon go before he cuts a promo. So you've got to sell this book, dude, in this.
We literally didn't give him any chance on this. Chris has just sprung this on him.
I mean, it can be as short as you want. You can literally but we've already seen that your macho impression is fantastic. So we'd love it if you could drop a little promo for the guys and girls listening.
I will do it. I'm so sad. I dropped when I did the Mile High promo, I broke my macho glasses.
No!
So they really helped me get into character. I had them in my ski pocket, and my son was coming off a lift, and when I picked them up, he elbowed them and cracked them in half. So I usually actually have them on the desk for this exact moment, and it really
he's gimmickless
helps.
right now. You are
I'm just gonna have to go raw, but it's just like you go and just go, yeah, April 2nd coming, the Macho Man biography first. First, it's a Macho Man you script, and then it's a Macho Man biography. Dig it!
Yes, yes, John. That's what we've been waiting for. So, anybody listening, watching on YouTube, check out Jon Finkel's book, The Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage, comes out 2nd of April, just before WrestleMania. So, it's been fantastic to have you on, John, and we wish you all the best with the book. And I will be digging into your back catalogue as well. Excuse the pun. I will be digging into 1996, a biography. Definitely looking at that because it was a great year. And we hope everybody that is listening can dig into your back catalogue as well. And we are extremely excited about this new book.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate for having me on.
Thank you very much, John. We appreciate your time. You know, you're a busy man. We're not that busy, but, you know, we really do appreciate when we get to have amazing authors like yourself on the show to talk about their really cool wrestling books. So, you know, thank you so much. Our listeners and watchers appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
I don't think you might notice it. You might know if you're watching it. I'm smiling the whole time because you're talking about one of the coolest wrestlers that ever fucking lived.
Absolutely. You can't, you can't talk about wrestling without talking about the Macho Man. The most imitated, along with your Ric Flairs or, Macho
He's right.
Man.
Hogan's and Flair's and, Bret Hart and all that, like, Savage is right in there.
He's in there. He is probably the most imitated wrestler for, fancy dress.
He would be the most flamboyant motherfucker on Mount Rushmore with a big ass hat and a feather in it and everything else.
Absolutely. That is why we love Macho Man Randy Savage. Like I say, I've got this out before. Look at this fucking guy, man.
Yeah.
Absolute fantastic. It's great that we've got now, like John was saying, the people he was talking to were people that were sort of, he's not rehashing the old stories that everybody's heard on every podcast by everybody and, the rumors and innuendo. He's talking to people that worked, people that you probably might not even know. Like I say,
you wouldn't think to talk to
the Bonettes or whatever, on Spider-Man, the girls that played those characters. So it is people that sort of were around him in a more personal sort of way. So we're getting more, and like you say, Paul Orndorff's son, people that were really close to him in a different way. He spoke to Jim Duggan and people like that. So really looking forward to this book. We will be getting a copy. We're going to try and get a signed copy from the man himself, Jon Finkel.
Oh, we'll see what we can do.
We'll see what we can do. We'll see if we can get. We'll chuck him a few quid and see if he can bang one in the post to us.
Yeah.
It's something I'm really looking forward to digging into. So, anyone out there who was a fan of Macho Man Randy Savage, and let's face it, everyone who's listening to this was a fan of Matt. I don't know any wrestling fan that wasn't a fan of Macho Man.
That wasn't a fan
Randy
and
Savage.
didn't do an impression.
100%, 100%. Let's a shout out to our man as well, who's sort of a modern day Randy Savage on the wrestling scene.
You're talking about Sunset.
We're talking about Mr. Sunset Skip. So he's going to hopefully love this interview and dig into the book too. Savage has influenced the whole generation and was loved by many, many people. So, yeah, this looks to be a great read.
Yeah. I'm going to apologize now because I want everybody to freak out, and subscribe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do the subscribe. I had to get a Savage impression, and even at the end of the show. Chris, have you got one?
I don't know about that, man. Maybe I can pull it off. Oh, yeah.
Why not? So yeah, if you've liked what we've done tonight and today or whatever it is, it's fucking hell. Yeah, the Apple listeners, we are so grateful for you for doing that and getting us where we are, right now. For those who aren't listening or watching, there's a subscribe button. Smash it, tickle it, do your thing. If you're listening on Spotify, I don't know how that works. Just, do something.
Yep, please do something.
If you are on Apple as well, it would be amazing if we got some of those Meltzer 5 stars. You know,
Yes, please.
6 if we're in the Tokyo Dome, maybe one day.
Yeah, don't treat us like the Kurt Angle of podcasts. Give us that 5-star.
We don't want 4.75.
You get what I'm saying? Come on.
Yeah, what else can we say? Like, apart from go and buy John's book.
Absolutely. Available from ECW Press, 2nd of April.
That's right.
Get that shit. Buy it.
And, you know, keep watching what we're doing. I hope you've enjoyed what we've been up to these past few weeks where we've been working together in person, doing some more interviews in person, you know, ragging on tweets.
Yeah, I sent you another one today, innit?
Yeah, we will have another bad tweet episode, you know, fairly soon. I think it's quite cathartic in its way. I know it winds Chris up early.
Yeah.
And he needs to, you know, do something to get out of that mindset. But
that's what I'm saying. I need to be like the samurai, is to do something calming after I've been wielding my sword.
I mean, to be fair, there is someone whose gimmick we have actually just taken on for that whole show, and it is about terrible wrestling takes. But I digress.
It's we've just got a tweet from Good Bad Wrestle, Good Cop Bad Cop. Only 10 minutes in, and I'm already worried about Chris's blood pressure.
It should have been. Fucking.
It's all right, man. I'm on medication for my blood pressure. Don't worry about that. So yeah, we really enjoyed that. We had a blast, and we will be doing more of those because we can't just ignore the stupidness that goes on Twitter or X as it is now known.
That's right.
You know, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, isn't it, Jay? We're just going to keep pushing out the
pods.
We
are indeed.
We've got more quizzes to come at you.
Yes, we do have more quizzes to come, you know, come in your ears like Chorley FM.
Correct.
I've got to be honest, we've got not much else to say. Friends and family, have a wonderful Easter break, whatever you are doing, wherever you are, however you're doing it. Keep listening, keep watching. I'm JB, the man sitting next to me, the best Chris in all of wrestling podcasts.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful Easter break, doing what you're doing. Take care, everyone. We'll see you soon. Dig it.
Dig it.